It's Thursday afternoon in Switzerland. It's Space Café Scotland time, our brand new first Space Café Scotland by Angela Mathis in association, hard English word for me at least, in association with Astro Agency will begin soon. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. We will learn and improve based on your feedback. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher of SpaceWatch.Global, and we are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. With Angela Mathis, CEO of think tank Mass in Edinburgh, we found a great friend and a wonderful host for our Scottish outreach. We are also very grateful to have the team of Astro Agency around Daniel Smith on board. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. We also keep our fan shop open online for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. The edition 1 has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love, and your support is needed to keep our work alive. And we do that for you. If you have missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the event section and later on YouTube. We will host our Space Café Scotland very regularly. With that, my job is done for today. Not really, I'm coming back later on. And I like to hand over to your host in Edinburgh today. Angela, over to you.
Hello, Space Watchers. I'm Angela Mathis, the CEO and co-founder of Think Tank Maths, and I'm your Space Café Scotland host. Thorsten proposed to create a regional focus Space Café for Scotland's space sector because, as you will hear, there is so much going on in Scotland's space industry and in our space science and research. It should be shared. It's really not because Scotland, where's Thorsten and his wife came a couple of years ago or a good few years ago for their honeymoon, so he says. Anyway, as an example, a few words of our company. It exemplifies the issue here. Think Tank Maths works for more than a decade with European Space Agency and European industry partners on things like casualty risk models for deorbiting space debris, rethinking the maths and physics to efficiently design spacecraft heat shields to survive atmospheric re-entry environments, or intelligent software for next generation space autonomy, systems that deal with unknown unknowns. And we're also working at refreshing engineering processes for the next generation of agile launchers. And we're partners with Shetland Space Centre and Dr. Moriba Jah, to provide space traffic management, space situation awareness services to satellite operators, both commercial and government, as the Shetland Space Domain Awareness Consortium with the support of PA Consulting. Who knew? It's typical of so many of Scotland's companies and our capabilities in space and science and technology. It's almost a big secret, but no more. So that's why we're doing Space Café Scotland. So, with the support of Daniel Smith of the Astro Agency, we agreed to work together on a programme and content for this bi-monthly Space Café Scotland series. We felt that the launch of the new Scottish Space Leadership Council website would be a great way to launch Space Café Scotland. Could someone please put the website link maybe in the chat, just as a reminder? And we'd like to thank CGI and Astro Agency again for their valuable support to create this contact and information hub for the Scottish, UK space sector and those around the world who want to reach out to us. So we bring here today an extremely knowledgeable and inspiring panel of leading members of Scotland's space industry and of the Scottish Space Leadership Council. Let me do some introductions. First of all, we have Hina Khan from Spire. Hina Khan is a Senior Project Manager for SpaceWatch.Global UK, a space-to-cloud data analytics company developing products and services for weather forecasting, aircraft monitoring, maritime domains, and from one of the largest constellations of multifunctional nanosatellites. Woo. Hina has responsibility for Spire's UK public sector engagement, which includes working closely with UK Space Agency and the European Space Agency, and managing multi-million-pound portfolio of technology and product development. Hina has a PhD in space science. I checked it out. It's got to do with the relationship of the sun and the Earth. Just so cool, and the ionosphere, that's really important, and has worked with academia and commercial space sector for over 25 years. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and has been instrumental in shaping Scotland's space sector. Hina is also an active member of the Scottish Space Leadership Council. Welcome, Hina. Yvette Hopkins is ex-colonel, she's retired, as an executive of the Shetland Space Centre, focused on establishing the spaceport complex in Shetland. That's the launch and data services. And the UK's Pathfinder launch scheduled for 2022. Yvette's portfolio includes global development, regeneration and growth, education through employment, and many others. Yvette brings her expertise as a leader, strategist, data and intelligence expert with a collaborative partner of the UK space sector. She leads a not so quiet life in Shetland these days. Mansi Joshi is New Voices in Space. Mansi is a recent aerospace engineering graduate, currently working in computational software sector, and is one of the founding members of the Scottish Space Leadership Council, New Voices in Space group. We'll need to find out what that's about, and we will for sure. Throughout her academic and professional journey, Mansi has actively strived towards getting young people, especially females, involved in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. Her experience ranges for organising and delivering international science workshops to primary and secondary school outreach, as well as being invited to speak in several leading space industry events. She's a strong advocate for women in STEM and drives towards equal representation within the industry. Yay, Nancy. Christina Tamani. Christina works at the Space and Satellites Business Development Executive as the Business Development Executive for the University of Edinburgh, commercialising the university research and ensuring that intellectual property from the universities gets into industry. She's also an innovation advisor for Sprint programme. She'll tell us about that. We'll hear about that later. That's a fantastic programme. And a member of the Scottish Leadership Council. Christina brings with her over 10 years of commercial experience in a range of career paths and sectors, and has a true passion and drive for the space sector in the UK. You'll see it today. Karen Wilson joins us from Scotland's National Economic Development Agency. That's Scottish Enterprise. Karen leads the organisation's work with the space industry, focusing on sustainable and inclusive growth to deliver a significant and lasting effect on Scotland's economy. This has included supporting many businesses working across the sector in Scotland. And that's both from innovative homegrown companies and key international companies that have chosen Scotland as a strategic base. Karen has been active supporter of the Scottish Space Leadership Council from its early inception. Woo, impressive. Anyway, now to the introduce. Karen, I'm going to kick off with you. What has the Scottish Space Leadership Council, what is its purpose? Why was it formed? And who participates at the moment?
Well, thanks, Angela. And looking back to when the Scottish Space Leadership Council first came together, we're going back 5 years. And in 2016, it was a really interesting time for the space industry in Scotland. At that time, there was a number of initiatives in the years immediately preceding the makeup of the Scottish Space Leadership Council, and it marked a significant growth of the industry, which we've been experiencing here. And in fact, we're talking about a massive 12% growth rate year on year in the space industry in Scotland. So Scottish Enterprises Space Network Scotland project was delivering a return on investment of about £50 of R&D investment for every £1 that we were investing. And at the same time, the satellite applications catapult were corralling the downstream opportunities for the company based here in Scotland. That year, in 2016, it also marked for the first time the industry's ambition for the space industry to grow to a £4 billion industry by 2030. And that really requires rapid expansion. So that's when the Leadership Council was formed. And it was to bring the constituent parts of the industry together to share knowledge and experience of the opportunities to grow the industry and ultimately form a proactive and collegiate platform to enable and promote Scotland's space sector, focusing on tangible outcomes. And the work of the Council during the last year in particular has been making a substantial impact on the industry and its future growth. I won't go into any detail, but just to give you one example, just pick one example of the work that's going on with the Council just now is the Sustainable Space Challenges. And in fact, it's a plug for the website. The new Council website will reveal more details on that.
Thank you, Karen. Karen, so... sorry, Karen, you weren't finished. You were just pausing for breath.
I think you'd asked one more question, Angela.
Yes, I'd asked one more question.
The makeup.
Yes, exactly. The makeup. Yep.
The makeup of the council right now is there's about 30 plus company representatives on the council, but I know the plans for the future are to continue to expand on that engagement.
Excellent. And so, Karen, in a few words, how much does Scotland need space?
Okay, I believe that Scotland's got a prime position in commercial space worldwide. And I think it was referred to earlier that it's still only a little known fact here in the country itself. And this is despite the strong benefits that it brings across the country, the length and the breadth of the country. So, I mean, I just want to highlight two of those: the creation of jobs, like I say, across the length and the breadth of the country, in urban and in rural communities. And with that comes an increase in the ambition for future generations. And the second one is, I think the space industry can really develop on Scotland's net zero capability in the global fight against climate change. So there is a recognition of economic benefits of space amongst the government and the government agencies, so much so that the Scottish Government's Inward Investment Plan highlights space as one of the country's 9 key opportunities for where Scotland's strengths in industry match global investment flows. But just to turn your question around a minute, turn it on its head, how much does space need Scotland? And from my experience working in the industry, I think Scotland has some really unique characteristics, which when packaged together really creates a business environment, which is really quite special.
Excellent. Good. Like turning things on their head. Very much so. So I was going to turn now to Hina. Hina, so as a company, as Spire, who did come and, as we said, sort of made Scotland a strategic base, what does the Scottish Space Leadership Council mean to those that might be listening in from around the world? And what did Scotland offer Spire? Just as an example, what would you get if you were analysing, or what should you consider when you're analysing Scotland as a place to come and set up and invest in to be here in Scotland?
Yes, that's a really interesting question, and it falls on quite nicely actually from what Karen has been saying. You know, my background, obviously, as you said, has been long and extended within the space sector, both here in Scotland and across the UK. But of late, obviously, working with Spire, who came to Scotland just at the time that Karen had said, 2016, 2015, when things were really changing here in Scotland. The environment was changing, and there was a an awareness of something quite special happening in Scotland in the development of the sector and the growth within various different areas of technology development. So Spire arrived in 2015, and really at that time Spire was a company looking to set roots into development of technologies and what has ultimately now become, as you said, one of the largest multifunctional small satellite platforms in the world. And by that we mean satellites the size of a loaf of bread, which are orbiting in kind of low Earth orbit of around 500 kilometers. And we were looking for a place where we could really set base for that. And looking across Europe, we hadn't identified Scotland as that is the place to go when we first started making inquiries. But what transpired was working with entities within Scotland, Scottish Enterprise being one, but also looking at the skills and the business environment within which we would be embedded. It was really positive and supportive to try to deliver on the things that were priorities for Spire at that time. We were looking for engineering expertise. We were looking for skills coming out of excellent universities. We were looking for support within the agencies and government to a certain degree that were supportive of looking at new businesses and setting these things up. Karen mentioned the inward investment strategy. Space has now become one of the key areas of growth within that inward investment and strategy, and that's something I've been very close to helping to develop. So really, it was all of these things coming together through the formation of the Leadership Council, which was prioritising fairly disruptive ideas at the time within UK and within the sector, and capitalising on what that could mean for a country like Scotland, and really supporting businesses looking to drive that sort of growth. So I think it's all of those things that really have that melting pot of ideas that allow people to be, being entrepreneurial and thinking outside of that box of where these things can move forward.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that leads very nicely to outside of that box. I'm going to bring in here Yvette, Yvette Hopkins. Yvette, as you said, you've got a lot on your plate. The tranquil life of Unst in Shetland is no more for you. What has this Scottish space environment, because you're doing a lot of firsts up there, what is the Scottish space environment, how has it lent itself to you guys to doing sort of fast pace, to launch next year, 2022?
Yeah, okay, so I always hate following Hina because she's the smartest human being on the face of the planet, but I'll try and do my best. Now, listen, I think it just to riff off of what Hina and Karen said, it's the end-to-end capabilities that you can find here in Scotland, right? Everything from the design, build, launch, the down linking of data. So that number one is critically important. And then I think Karen also mentioned sort of the committed governmental support. So everything from the UK, national strategic goal of, basically capturing 10% of the global market by 2030, committing, I think recently Boris Johnson committed to the 2022 flight from Scotland, first orbital flight, which I'm happy to announce is, the Pathfinder flight from Shetland next year. But again, the talent pool is absolutely incredible here. The human capital that rests not only from a historical perspective as a country that, is replete with engineers and a lot of the STEM, and as I like to say, STEAM capabilities. That talent pool is really incredible here. And then there's also a public interest. I think that we are gaining more and more traction from a public interest perspective. But really, sort of, if I bring it close to home to us, our story in Shetland, the planning process that we've been going through to design, build, et cetera, everything has come from Scotland. So our planners, our designers, all of that thus far has been Scotland-based, and that's really important. And then the other thing that has been helpful for us up until this point is the incredible supply chain that is resident here. And, as a private spaceport, when we had to go around to our investors, that's one of the key questions that they ask. So that inward investment and out with has been critically important. And then early on, we did a couple of space-based activities. That early space-based activities where, the launch capability, excuse me, what that did is we were able to, as a multitude of Scottish agencies were able to, in a sort of crawl, walk, run capability, the ability to coordinate, work all the kinks out, because we're all building towards that end. But that collaborative nature that we're talking about, the fact that, just down the street, is maybe the other guy in the agency has really been important. And then I think the most important thing is Scotland is full of whiskey, and that is important. Just saying.
Excellent. Great. So I'm going to bring to, others have touched on it, but I think Christina and Mansi, you're going to come in next. So Christina in particular, you're really looking at, the skills, the IP that's developed from there, the transfer across, that's your bit. So if agility and skills and speed of reaction is key for new space, over to you, Christina. What can you tell us? What have you got to add to the story?
Well, apart from the great investment in whiskey, which I think is the most important space story really of the day, there is, as everyone has said already, there is so much happening in Scotland, and there's so much innovation that happens in Scotland, and it all happens in universities, or a large chunk of it does. And it's about the pipeline of new talent, and I'm sure Mansi will add to that slightly later on. But it's having those students, for example, who are studying subjects that are going to be relevant and useful for our industrial friends further down the line. And then it's researchers who are developing things that can then be utilized by industry. So the University of Edinburgh particularly is positioning itself as a global space university. And we are well positioned to be able to do that because, like the whole of Scotland, we're able to contribute to every point on the supply chain. So we have folks who are working on things like on clean burn fuels, for example, in chemistry, engineers who are looking at fuel pods and developing different kinds of optics, loads of research around artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum mechanics, and then we are very well known in AI in Europe, actually, as Edinburgh. Data analysis is something we're particularly strong, especially on space data, and Edinburgh is trying to position itself as a space data capital of Europe, and I think that is something we can do pretty well. We also have robotics in space, which is great, but around that, and one of the things that's important, kind of coming back to Hina's point and Yvette's point about STEM and STEAM, is that there is so much more. There's different aspects of space that will need talent injection. And that is things around space law, for example, psychology of long-term travel, for example. So things people are going to be going to Mars. How do you deal with the 40-minute delay of being on a different planet? There's folks working in Edinburgh on the social dimensions of outer space who are kind of conceptualizing what the world would look like when we live on Mars and the Moon and anywhere else we decide to live in different planets. And what do you think about? And they're writing sci-fi novels around that. They're creating art around that. But they're making humanity think about what that's going to look like. And all of this is brilliant that's happening in Scotland. And I think the reason it's progressing so nicely in Scotland is because everyone wants it to succeed. Everyone loves it here. I mean, the whiskey is great, the landscapes are great, but the people make it happen. We can pick up the phone to each other and we can fix a problem in a couple of hours, which will take days, weeks, anywhere else. But we just get things done. And I think that's what makes Scotland particularly stand out. And just to come back to a point that Karen made earlier, we're also doing lots of really impactful things globally. So, for example, the Scottish Space Leadership Council is running the Sustainable Space Challenges campaign at the moment. which is all around trying to make sure that the space sector in the UK is sustainable and environmentally friendly as far as we can do it. So there is some more information on the website, on the brand new website that we've launched today, by the way, and a big thanks to Astro Agency and CGI who helped us to create that website, so you can read more about it. But it's all happening right now. We're right in the middle of it, and we're creating something that's going to last for generations, and it's awesome to be in the middle of it. Genuinely the best thing ever. Just can't get enough of it.
Great. So we've managed to mention the website 3 times now. So yeah, and we've got the link there. So thank you for that. So I'm going to bring Mansi. Mansi is fascinating. So the Scottish Space Leadership Council has a New Voices group. So Mansi, come on in. Tell us what New Voices in Space is about.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So, New Voices is a kind of a new built working group at the moment. We're quite a diverse group of people working together and volunteering our time just to really drive the next generation of space enthusiasts. As Christina quite rightly mentioned, not only is this engineers that build things, this is artists, this is psychologists, this is, a law that's a massive kind of new impact at the moment. So we're really just striving to encourage anyone and everyone and let them know that space is a passage that is open for all. I think, space can be seen, the people working in space can be seen quite stereotyped. I know in engineering it is quite like that. And honestly, it is quite a reality, the way and things are, the demographic of people. So what we're really trying to do is get that primary and secondary outreach in, where kids can, I guess be influenced or, very easily, and just to let them know that this is a path that is open to everyone, no matter what your background, your demographic, your social class. Space is something that everyone can get involved with, and perhaps, even if it's not something that you get involved with as a day-to-day profession, it's still something that you can be involved with doing other things, volunteering work, outreach work. There's so many things that you can get involved with, and I think, as everyone has quite rightly said on this panel, Scotland is the perfect place for this. It has almost any aspect of space you can think of. There's something that you can link with in Scotland. So I think it's just the perfect environment for this natural growth of the next generation to now begin and really be pushed into a kind of new global sector for Scotland.
Oh, wonderfully said. Brilliant. So a catalyst for all of this. I mean, it is astounding, and we all woke up one morning and we had 5 spaceports. So I'm going to ask Karen, spaceports and launchers, but 5 spaceports. What differentiates those spaceports? Give us a view of this. I know we've got, we're right at the north there. We've got the Gulf Stream helping us because it's nice and temperate and all that stuff. Tell us about the 5 spaceports.
You are right, Angela. There is 5 spaceports developed in Scotland, which in itself gives you a great feel for the scale of the opportunity. But I'm not talking about the scale of the launchers themselves. I'm talking about the scale of the market size. And what Scotland's spaceports are looking to develop is small satellite launch. So it's vehicles that are much smaller than what you'll have been, what you see for takeoff from likes of Kennedy or French Guiana. And in some cases, for the likes of Prestwick Spaceport and Machrihanish Spaceport, what you'll see actually is an airplane taking off from a runway. So we could see that most days. And Scotland's other 3 spaceports, Yvette's already talked of Shetland Space Centre, which is on the northernmost inhabited island in Britain. There's also Space Hub Sutherland on the north of the mainland, and on the Western Isles, North US, Spaceport 1. And Scotland is a really great position to be delivering small satellites into space. They've got good access to some of the orbits, which are hard to reach from other more countries, particularly as you get closer to the equator. So we've got real geographical advantage, and our natural assets as well really work in our favour. But I'd also like to highlight two of Scotland's launch vehicle companies, Orbx and Skyrora. And independently, they've recently been, so Orbx have been successful and Skyrora have been successful in securing some European Space Agency funding, about 10 million between them in total on their own independent projects. And that's really quite a credit to what's happening and the phases of development that are ongoing here in Scotland in terms of our launch capability.
Yeah, and really interesting as well. I recently met and spoke to David from Thistle Rocketry. They've been hitting the news as well. So that's on propulsion, all kinds of dynamic propulsion for multi launchers. So got to be careful now, because we start mentioning some names, some won't get mentioned, and the people will get very jealous. But it's just to give an idea of what's going on. So I wanted to kind of flip now more into, and I think Mansi certainly touched on it. An agenda in Scotland is always about fairness, and we call it social mobility. Where opportunity for all is important. So I'm going to turn back to Yvette on Shetland. What are you? I mean, some of your remit is focusing on this. What does the spaceport bring to the local community in Shetland? What does it hope to bring to the local community in Shetland, which will be typical of the rest of the spaceports, I'd imagine. But you're here, so give us your view.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me go back out a little bit in terms of what spaceports do for us. Bottom line is Scotland. It's the rest of the story. It's the rest of the puzzle. So as we've talked about, Glasgow has this incredible satellite heritage. Edinburgh is this, incredible data-driven innovation, but we need a place to actually launch our own, bring down data on our own. And so it's the missing part of the stool. It's the missing part of the puzzle. So that allows us to have our own sovereign capability here, which is critically important. So from a local community perspective, I can't tell you. First of all, I hope everybody has an opportunity to come to Shetland. It's where I've made my home, but it's an amazing place. And Unst is this tiny little island in the the most northern island of the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so right now it's got about 600 folks that are on it. But back, 20 years ago or so, there used to be an RAF base there. And so there was a lot of heyday. There was, lots of folks there. There was economy, tourism, all sorts of things. When that left, what happened is the kids left. People had to go find work. They had to move from the island. And so, sort of a quick anecdotal story. It's, when we're up on island, and I live here in Shetland, what we hear a lot from folks is bring back our kids.
Yeah.
Bring back our kids to the island and, help us rebuild that economy. So I'm very excited about that. And the impact on Unst will be immediate. It's already happening. And it's really incredible. It will bring back life. It'll bring back the economy. It will be an outlet for the creativity and work ethic and innovation that already exists on the island. But if I take one step further out, when I talk about Scotland and a spaceport, again, it's that one-stop shopping. When you come to Scotland, you can now do it all. And I think that's really important. And I'm going to take one step more further out now that we have sort of this, the entire capability or ecosystem, it's a matter of national pride. You know what I mean? So when we launch, this is our space program, and first world countries have first world, space programs. And so that is really incredible. It keeps the skills, the talent, the advancement of the space sector going and keeping it alive. So as you have mentioned, everything from SDA or space domain awareness or space traffic management, we will continue to advance that with this ecosystem. And some of the things that Christina was talking about will continue to advance because we've got this entire system. So, and then finally, from a global perspective, this is about Scotland and what it's always done, which is solve global issues, be a part of the global story. And so it will ultimately change part of our footprint in the world and how people will view us. People will come to us, but more importantly, we want to continue to export and kind of create this, career progression that takes us around the world so that we continue to exchange ideas and to continue to build and advance us ultimately as a human species. That is my paid political announcement. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Over, as they say. Wonderful. Right. Hina, you talked when we first spoke about the disruptive nature, that this speed and disruption. Maybe just a last word from you on sort of that before we move on to the next and final topic.
Yeah, I know I've got the challenge of following Yvette, which I think we're doing a tit for tat, really, aren't we? So no, exactly. I mean, Yvette just really was able to identify all the key areas. And to be fair, I'm part of the bringing our children back. I'm not a child anymore, but I left, 25 years ago to go and pursue a career that really wasn't available for me here in Scotland. I've been in the space sector for ever and a day, but what has happened in the last 10 years, I've really been able to come back home. I live now in the same street that I grew up in. My children go to the school across the road, and that was something that I couldn't even have imagined 20 years ago, that I would come home to be able to be part of this sector. So really, I mean, absolutely across the islands, even more so. And if you've ever been to the islands, you'll see that demographic is really quite stark. So to be able to come back and bring back these, our children, our kind of next generation, and to be involved in this sector is really exciting. And that disruptive nature that I talk about, it's what Karen said, and the development that we have here in Scotland. We're not launching, bus-sized satellites from here. We're not taking 25-30 years to develop something that then gets launched and maybe gives you data in 10 years thereafter. We are launching things that can be developed from scratch to deliver data within a timeline of 6 to 12 months. Spire is developing satellites all of the time, launching continuously, and to have that access to be able to do that essentially within a few hundred miles of where the technology is designed is incredible, and it's that nature of what Christina said as well, being able to really have everybody that you need in that end-to-end capability of development very much located within earshot of each other, from the design of the engineering, development, testing, launching, and then getting the data down and providing services, and these services are global. We're not doing things which are just for the benefit of Scotland, which of course they will be, but it's they're looking to export it to the wider, the whole world, and then benefiting, all of the challenges that we have. And space really provides that platform for us to do it, and to be able to use Scotland as the test facility, the test bed to demonstrate this is something which is what is really quite exciting.
Yeah. And as I've understood, the Scottish Space Leadership Council just sort of was a place for everyone to gather. I remember, as I say, 10 years ago, we kept trying, but there seems to be now that momentum. There's been a tipping point, and the Scottish Space Leadership Council has really done that. Thank you all for all of that. And it is true. I mean, it's the speed and agility with which you can contact people. The openness, I think, has been mentioned here as well of people in Scotland. If you've got an idea, just they'll drop them something on LinkedIn. They'll pick up the phone. They'll talk to you. It's that's who we are. So I'm coming on to I think we're where we want to give people a chance to speak and ask questions, because I could go on like this all afternoon. It's just absolutely amazing. There's so much more material in your heads and so much more experience to pull out. But I want to come on to and Christina has mentioned it already, but COP26, so that's the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties 26, is in Glasgow this year, and around that, looking at your, it's called Sprint, the organization you've been part of, and looking at the profile of all of that, which is all about, the ecosystems and what we're doing in space, and it has to be responsible. So over to you, Christina, because we're going to make that the next theme of the next Space Café Scotland, because we have. So talk to us about the competition that's been set, the workshops that are going on, and the outputs that we hope from that, all in the context of working up to COP26.
Can do. Thank you, Angela. So in terms of the Sustainable Space Challenges, which is the competition that you mentioned that the Scottish Space Leadership Council is running, that's going very well. So we started the work in early 2021. We are now at a point of running specific workshops because 3 challenges got selected by an independent panel of judges, which was amazing. That was done on the 1st of April. I know that's not a joke. Hina over here is one of the challenge workshop leaders. So she's going to be running her particular stream. We're aiming to get people who provided the challenges and solution providers together to have a conversation and come up with something amazing and innovative and hopefully some solutions by the end of May. The idea is then we present back what's been found on the 23rd of June at 3 o'clock. I can send a link in the chat later on. But the long-term view is that we present this work at COP26 to show how we've come together as a sector to try to come up with some solutions. And one of the things that I think is important to mention is we are engaging with governments, we're engaging with environmental groups, but we're also looking for solutions not in the space sector. We are making sure that the right solution comes across, and we're borrowing expertise, best practice, thoughts, and anything else that we can from anyone else who has that solution. So Scotch Whisky Association being a perfect example of that. We've just been through that kind of experience, and they've been really great at advising us and moving things forward. You mentioned there something about Sprint. Happy to say a couple of words on that. So Sprint is a network of space-based universities across the whole of the UK. And so it's University of Edinburgh, Surrey, Southampton, Open University and Leicester. And the idea is that we work with small, medium enterprises to enable for them to access funding to work with these universities on space build. And that's space know-how, that's space hardware, space data, the whole supply chain again. And we're trying to share expertise across the university so the whole of the UK is well informed and derive real value and kind of drive innovation in the country as well. So that's really exciting. And have, again, coming back to sustainability angle, have lots of projects that are around agriculture, around climate change. And it's quite a nice, I think what the COP26 has allowed us to do this year, it's focused everyone on this because there's a good deliverable and people are looking at it in one direction, which is really exciting and interesting. And just to add to that, and coming back to kind of what Nancy was speaking about, we also have in Edinburgh, there's a Centre for Doctoral Training called SENSE, where we are getting students together who are using satellite data to be able to make climate change improvements and decisions using artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we're absolutely kind of on that trajectory to impact globally, as my colleagues have said today, but starting locally.
Right. So we, in other words, I think because we, as I say, I put my other hat on, think tank maths are also part of this, and we certainly input to that, and with Dr. Marie Baja, who's been inputting as well, who's also helping the Scottish thing. And I can see some people putting comments in. We want to develop our space industry in Scotland with a responsible attitude to the atmosphere. I mean, we don't know. One of the things that we don't know, and how would you even do that? What effect do we have? And we're talking about suborbital flights taking off from Prestwick, landing sort of over in Japan. What does that do as we pierce the ionosphere constantly? Is there going to be any impact on it? These unintentional negative effects, and certainly the space debris issue. We've got all eyes on that, right? All of us. we want to be developing our industry and make sure that it has those standards. And I think this initiative is brilliant. And again, on the website, so on the Scottish Space Leadership Council website, there's all sorts of stuff about can people join? Can people ask to join the workshops if you're maybe on this thing? Brilliant.
If you're a solution provider, then absolutely. If you think that there might be something you'd like to join up, there's some information on the website.
Okay.
And you're welcome to get in touch, of course.
Okay, right. So I think, guys, thank you so much. We're going to pass over to Torsten's going to help me because we've got about 15 minutes left if we really, really push it. But we need some questions. We need some to let the folks that have been sitting patiently listening to us all. But it has been a mammoth format and lots of people with lots of fantastic things to say. Torsten.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much for your questions. And I mean, thank you for this fantastic panel already. I mean, it's absolutely great. So there's a question from Colin Black that goes together with a question from our Garvey. What are the typical uses for all these satellites and how do we address concerns about satellite debris? I think that's primarily for Hina, but also from Sam, our H3. Where do they build the satellites? Come on, tell us where the secret place is.
So it's no secret. It's no secret at all. So all of the Spire satellites are built here in Glasgow, in a not very exciting place, in a facility called Sky Park, which is in the kind of south side of Glasgow. And we build all of Spire's production satellites. Now, as I said, these are not satellites which are the size of buses. These are satellites which essentially are about this big. So they're about the size of a loaf of bread. They're called nanosatellites, CubeSats, and you know, they're relatively easy and lightweight. They're about 6 kilograms, and we have a production facility here in Glasgow where we build all of the internal components, so all the chips and all the elements that we need to take all our data and make all our measurements, and then we put it in a casing, which is a standard size, and that casing has solar panels, which is what gives us power on orbit, and then, you know, we go through a rigorous testing regime to make sure that it won't break up in orbit, it won't cause any issues, and then, you know, we put it into a little casing, and it's a little pod that it gets put into, gets taken to a launch vehicle, perhaps to Shetland in the not too distant future, and then on that rocket it then gets taken to space and then is deployed from that. But because they're quite small, they're built very, very easily here in modest facilities, I would say, here right based in Glasgow. So, you know, if you want to come and see Sam, then absolutely we'd love to have you or your classmates in to have a look around. As to what these satellites do, I think somebody's already made an answer in the chat, but, you know, Spire satellites are there. We're listening to what's happening on the Earth. So we don't have any optics on our platform, but you can have optics, obviously, to make various measurements. Spire satellites are listening to radio frequencies. So we're listening into signals which are already around and being transmitted from various other much larger satellites. And as those signals penetrate the atmosphere or bounce off the Earth or are being transmitted from ships and from aircraft, we can then gain information as to what those signals have gone through or what those signals are transmitting. And from that, we get a global picture of what is happening here on the Earth. Our satellites are not very high, relatively speaking, low Earth orbit. So after a year or a couple of years, they burn up in the atmosphere, and there's essentially no debris as a result of that. Obviously, whilst they're in orbit, yes, there is we do track and monitor all of our assets, so we know where they all are and we know what they're doing. So, but yeah, you can find out a lot of information from a relatively small satellite, and then the large number of them is what gives you the information on a global context.
Great. Thank you very much. So, who would like to answer the question of Harry, age 6? He would like to learn more about space and become an astronaut. So, and that's the question before we ask the rocket question. So, Yvette, stay in standby. Please stay in standby. So, Nancy.
Harry, really glad to see that you're interested in space at such a young age. Such a fascinating, interesting subject. To be an astronaut, you have to do study science, I guess. It's really important that you have a really good knowledge and understanding of space and how things work. So one way would be kind of doing a lot of research and studies into a specific area of space. And another way to kind of become an astronaut is to be a fighter pilot. So, in the military, in the RAF, that's kind of another option to get into being an astronaut. But it's worth noting, as you grow older, sometimes, you might not want to go down that career path. You can still be involved in the space industry, even if you're not an astronaut. I think astronauts are like the celebs of the space world. They get, all of the credit. Everyone knows who they are. But there are thousands and thousands of people behind the scenes working on other things which are just as important. And, without them, people wouldn't be able to go into space. So, yeah, it's really important to mention that as well, that you don't have to be an astronaut to work in the space industry. You can do pretty much anything else you want. And then just to learn a bit more, I'd recommend maybe there's quite a few good TV shows out there for kids. I think Maggie Adair Pocock did a show on CBeebies recently. So there's lots of resources out there, even on YouTube, lots of videos. Or, if you're watching something like this, you might learn something new, or you can reach out to us or anyone. You might see someone cool on TV and want to ask them something, reach out to them, because I'm sure they'd be happy to help you and answer any more questions that you have.
Yeah, and I think a plug also for Spacebar, Astro Agency Spacebar as well. Yeah, we had Tim Peake came on there. So yeah, there's a whole crowd of people. You don't have to stay till.
Although, Angela, I'm not sure Spacebar is an appropriate place for a 6-year-old.
We had some when Tim Peake was there. They were allowed to come on for that particular before bedtime. I was there. I saw it.
That's right. And as you're part of, or with the kingdom, part of ESA still, I would like to mention the ongoing and open call for astronauts in ESA. So, everybody who is in the certain age, I think 6 is a bit young to apply right now, but I think they have some interesting criteria, and it's open now, and that's the important message here.
Can I riff off of that, because I'm really excited about. So that particular astronaut program, there's 2 things that they have foot stomped, and that is they're looking for girls, women, which I think is really good. And then the other part that I'm really proud of is that they're looking for disabled. They foot stomped on the disabilities, and I think that's very important.
Yeah. Bravo.
Good. Let's take the next question from Ashley O2, and that's for Yvette, I think. Is Scotland's companies planning to launch in both sun-synchronous and equatorial orbits? And I can guess an answer.
Yeah, so we specifically are polar sun-synchronous. Now, whether there are Scottish companies who will launch equatorial, of course, they will do that around the globe to get the specific data that they need, but we in Scotland are polar sun-synchronous.
Great. Then I think a question for Karen. What advice would the panel give to small nations with growing space industries?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a tough one. From our own experience, it's not that we started with nothing. We've had an industry here working on the space working to develop space instrumentation and space technologies for a substantial number of years. It's just more recently, say in the last 15 years, that we've really had this commercial industry take hold of, and that's where a lot of the industry growth's happening. So it really depends on where your starting basis is as a country. We've certainly been seeing other well, small and bigger nations enter into the space industry as globally it's gathering momentum. There's for the likes of there's some nations who have based their developments on infrastructure. There's some nations that have based their developments on specific capabilities, but I think that where Scotland really has a leading edge is our, and several of the panelists have mentioned it today, the end-to-end capability. We've got a really nice collection of strengths that we can offer, and that I think that is a unique quality, and some, I don't know, I would hope it would be hard to replicate in our competitor nations. So I hope that answers your question.
And I think I can add that we have this week and last week we have the UN COPIO Scientific and Technical Subcommittee talking in Vienna, or virtually in Vienna, and I think that's a place for every small nation to find their spot and learn from the others, talk with the others, and just engage. I think at the moment we have 95 nations are in UN COPIOs, and I think there were a few applications from countries like Bangladesh are this year. So it's an interesting, it's a growing community under the UN umbrella, what is always a good sign. I would like to take one final question here, because I see that Yvette and Tina are typing questions and taking them off the Q&A here. Oh, that's great. Yeah, keep on going, keep on going. It's fine. It's just when they disappear, you say, oh, where's it? Okay, Angela, I think a question for you. I mean, we heard, and that's from Pete Simmons, interesting to hear LEO satellites burn up in the atmosphere after a few years. Is there a growing environmental impact of cumulative burning up satellites in the atmosphere? Or anyone else also can raise?
So could you repeat the question again? Sorry, I haven't. What is so
the environmental impact of burning satellites in the atmosphere?
I don't think the burning, I mean, if you're talking about what does it release when it burns, if that's the question, I don't know if someone else can take that. I think the question is, will they burn as they deorbit? And one of the things that we looked at was design for demise. So, you know, if the configuration or the materials that are used, and I think that's something that our satellite producers do have to think about, because it was very clear the burn rates and how something fell. It could fall with a piece of the satellite that actually acted as a shield to the rest of the equipment. But I don't. If the question was about, you know, gases or things that were given off, or you know, is it all burned up and how is it dispersed? Not me to answer that. I don't know if
anyone else want to jump in.
I was just going to say, and I'm no expert on this, but and I'm not going to answer the direct question, sorry, but one of the things that is unique, I think, to Scotland and UK writ large is all of our goals for sustainability, you know, our net carbon zero, all of those goals are, I think, unique in some ways in Shetland. So everybody is working towards those ends. And I think, you know, that might answer some of your questions, but I don't know if my panelists have got more detail on that. But that is a USP, I think, for Scotland.
And in terms of the question, it's always good to find out at other panels that they are providing these wealth of knowledge there as well. So we don't have to find answers to all questions. That is not the thing. I think a very short one, also potentially a complicated one, are what is the global export potential of the Scottish space industry? Who wants to take that one?
I can have a little bit of a go at that, considering Aspire is a global company. I think, what is the global export potential? I think the potential is pretty big. I think the potential is significant because, as I said, space is a global industry, and so the applications that we are looking at, be it to do with climate change, be it to do with better weather forecasting, be it to do with better skill development across different industries. I think these are all things that can be translated into other areas. Specifically, I think what, as I said earlier, was things that can be looked at specifically within Scotland, it being a reasonable sized country, but where you have a variety of different challenges. When you look at environmental conditions here in the kind of where I'm based in Glasgow, compared to what Yvette's having to deal with over in Shetland, it's vastly different. And so you need to think of solutions which apply specifically within those regimes. You can then imagine that those sorts of areas would be translated to other urban environments or other rural communities. The other big thing, obviously, is connectivity. Again, that's a massive challenge here in Scotland because we have very connected places down here in the lowlands, but across the islands, it's really, really difficult. So I think the challenges and the potential for us being able to develop solutions really locally based here to make sure that our communities are connected and our communities are really kind of making use of the space environment are really applicable elsewhere. And that whole export part is massively important for both Scotland, but also for us to be channeling and demonstrating that these things can be solved through applications and use cases within the space sector.
Great. With that, Angela, back to you for some
last words or a last round. It's like, maybe we could go on till 2 a.m, but that's, I don't know if those guys in Berlin and Switzerland would be happy about that. Look, this has been amazing as a first, and it's the first of many. We started with, I'll say Scots are known around the world. I know this. I lived 20 odd years in Switzerland, in Germany, in France. We're known to be adventurous and yet humble in nature, very humble people. We don't sort of go around blowing our own horn. We want to give you what we would say a wee peek into what's going on here across Scotland in space. So I hope we have just started to justify in your mind why we could say Scotland has quietly become a leading European space nation. We hope you agree, and we hope that you want to hear more. So join us again it'll be Thursday, 1st of July, put that in your diaries, same time, 3 o'clock British summertime, to discuss responsible and sustainable space development. We haven't got the guests lined up yet, but there's a lot to choose from, so it's going to be good. And thank you to each and every one of our panelists and to everyone who's logged on. And just one last thing, Torsten, I've been waiting to do since we talked about this before I hand back to you. I'm a space watcher. I think you all deserve a t-shirt, more than a t-shirt. Thank you very, very much. Back to Torsten.
Yeah, thank you. And again, a fantastic panel. What I would like to tell our audience now, when we get this slide up from our production team, thank you very much, is what comes next on our end. So tomorrow we will have another first. We will launch our Space Café Greater Bay Area, China. So, and that's the region, Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, if I spell that correctly. And that's run by the wonderful Blaine Curcio, and his guest is Greg Daffner of GAPSAT. So if you can make it at 10 a.m. CEST, so 9 a.m. our British time, it would be really worth to listen what happened in China, especially if you might have heard that today they launched some big thing into space, their own space station, or the first module of the first space station. Next week, I will speak in my 33 minutes with Temidayo Onyosun from Space in Africa about the global budgets in the space industry. On 6th of May, I will speak at 4 p.m. European time. In the second, no, not I will speak, Andreas Schippers will speak with the ESA astronaut Thomas Reiter in the Space Café Germany, and it will be, of course, in German. 1 day later, we launch another first, the Space Café Canada, by the lovely Dr. Jessica West, and she will talk with Dr. David Kendall of the Outer Space Institute. So it's something you shouldn't miss, and that's next Friday. 1 week later, on the 11th, I will speak with Laura Forsyth about human spaceflight. A week later, Catherine Courtney from the UK about education in space. And on the 20th, we will launch our Space Café UK. If you might ask, why not UK? So here we are. And that's run by Laurie Scott and Andrew Ball. And their first guest will be Ian Jones of Goonhilly Earth Stations. All events are going to be online on Eventbrite, as you know that. As always, we would like to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. We only can learn from your feedback and improve, of course. Don't forget to sign up to our daily or bi-weekly newsletters to stay up to date of SpaceWatch.Global. And if you like to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support will help us. Take your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.spacewatch.global. And I know I repeat myself, but we need your support to continue our work and have these fantastic shows like we had it today. Thank you all very much for your interest today, and thank you, Angela, and your entire panel for this super inspiring and exciting talk, and again, being our guest. Thanks again also to the entire team behind the scenes, and Mansi said it already, without them, we couldn't do that so smoothly and so perfectly delivered to all of you out on the screen. So I hope you all will stay safe and stay healthy. And thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next week or tomorrow or whenever. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you very much.